Hi, I thought I would hop on for a quick video. It's been a minute. I think the last one I posted was last week. This break has been a little bit intentional because I wanted to think about what sort of structure I might want to try and adhere to with some degree of consistency, starting with the beginning of August. So I've been thinking about what kind of videos on what kind of timetable and things like that. So once we have our first full week of August, which is next week, I'm going to start rolling that new schedule out, and I'm going to let it be a little bit flexible while I find sort of my groove and what works and what's not working with the rest of my routine and my life and my job and my kids and all the things. But as you know, I like to weave in between the spiritual stuff and the psychological relationship stuff because I feel like they are so intertwined, and we often don't talk about them as being intertwined. So much of the work that we're doing in our emotional lives and in our relationships deeply reflects the spiritual work that we're doing. That's why I dip between those two topics and I try to weave them together as best I can. But all of that being said, the purpose of today's video is to talk a little bit about something that I've noticed about the healing process. And I like to call this the pendulum effect. So let's imagine when you start the healing process, you're sort of stuck on this side of a pendulum that normally in health would hover in this center place and maybe swing back and forth a little bit. But when we're hurting, when we have a wound to heal, when our spirit is calling for a specific kind of transformation, we'll often start in this sort of place, like we're stuck on one end of the pendulum. So just for the sake of an example, let's say that this pendulum in my example has to do with anger. Here in a place of health, you would be hovering in this center place around anger, sort of balanced and swinging left and right depending on the circumstance, and settling in the middle when things are quiet. But when somebody has something to heal around anger, they'll often start here. So for this example, I'll say that this side of the pendulum reflects an extreme challenge with anger outbursts. And this side of the pendulum, in an extreme opposite way, might be an avoidance of anger, an extreme avoidance of anger that makes it so somebody can't sit with anger and get the information that they need from that emotion, okay? And in the middle, it would obviously be a more balanced relationship with anger as an emotion in general. So when someone is on a healing journey, in this example, it's regarding anger, they start to put pressure on the stuck position. And when we put pressure on something in order to get it unstuck, often what happens is it swings in the opposite direction with a certain amount of force. And what that feels like is then we can get stuck in the opposite place and find ourselves really struggling to find the middle ground. Let's say, using our anger example, somebody begins their journey really struggling with anger outbursts, like I said, and they start to put gentle pressure on that by learning the way that that affects other people, by understanding the ways that that has interfered with their relationships, with their emotional intimacy in relationships and whatnot. And that causes them to swing in this other direction and just get silent. Swinging from one direction to the other on the healing journey is very common, and people can get a little bit discouraged by that because in both extremes, we really aren't experiencing the health that we want in our relationships and in our own experience in life. And so I want to encourage anyone who feels like they really worked on healing this and now they're way over here and they're like, why am I doing this? I'm not liking this healing process. I want to really emphasize that it doesn't stop here. Just like an actual pendulum, let's say it got rusty on this side and got stuck here. When you finally dislodge it, it swings in the other direction, and then what starts to happen? It starts to swing slower and slower and slower, and then it settles. That's what the healing journey to me often looks like when I'm working with people, or even when I'm working with myself, is that there is this process. And sometimes this process can take months or years of figuring out our own middle ground. Once we've dislodged ourselves from an extreme position that was not serving us in our lives, that's when we really enter the pathway of healing. And on that pathway, we're going to experience a lot of things. The pendulum to me represents this process of sort of back and forth, learning the middle ground, the sweet spot that allows us to feel really embodied and safe and connected with others in relationships, and to serve ourselves in the ways that we need to in order to feel our best selves. So I used anger as an example, but if you think about your own life and the area that you've been walking a healing journey on, you can apply the pendulum example to that instead. It's my hope that this message not only reach those who might feel a little comforted by the fact that this is simply part of the process and that there is more to come, You will get to this point in the middle of your healing journey where you'll find a sweet spot, but I'm also hoping that this video will reach those who are observing someone else confused at why they went from here to here or why they seem to kind of change overnight, and who are struggling to connect with that person during their change and their growth and their evolution. They may very well be in a process, and if you continue to watch and observe, you should eventually see them land somewhere in the center, as long as they haven't gotten stuck partway down the path in their healing journey. Anyway, I hope that was helpful, and I applaud anyone who is in the process of healing. And really, I don't know a single person who doesn't need to heal something, who isn't stuck in some area of their lives. This applies to all of us. I'll come back with a new video soon. Bye.